correctly, Adam. That was impressive.
Hey,
Ramsey, good to see you
my,
again.
my
Likewise.
best friend in New York was named Ali Al-Hamamzi, who's an Egyptian guy. So like, maybe that was why. I don't know.
You've had practice.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Ramsey, thanks for joining us. I was really excited when Santosh said that he's like, hey, my VP of sales or whatever, my head of sales was like, coming to the show. Can he be, should we bring him on as a host? I was like, absolutely. Like, no, uh, having another guest, we had one, like we had two last week. It's such a great, it's just amazing to have like another perspective on all of it. So welcome. Thank you very much. So
Thank you.
I'm gonna basically kind of host today, and I don't think I've ever been more excited about one of these because the topic itself I just find so fascinating, right? It's like Santosh, and he'll say like I wasn't entirely responsible for it. Fair enough. This company that you showed up at was stuck at like a single digit ARR. They had a very weak value proposition in a highly competitive space. And then 18 months later, they did a deal at $980 million valuation led by Sequoia. Like, like what, how does that happen? Right. So, I've heard this story 5 or 6 times. I still want to hear it again. You know what I mean? So Ramsey, having your added perspective of like having lived through it, I mean, and I'm sure everybody in the call is like, sitting on the edge of their seats as well. But like, I just want to know what happened, right? Like what was the scene when you got there? And then how did it all evolve into that, basically the building blocks to what it is today, right? What we all know it is.
So to
I will definitely
start
tell you.
with, and
I
I'll
just
bring up
want
my
to I just want to throw out there that there's a track record that Santosh has. He's so humble that he'll never tell you he had anything to do with it. But go look at his resume, and just weird coincidence that everything he's touched has turned into gold. That's all I gotta say. So I'll leave it there. But
you're being kind, Ramsey. Uh, but to set the stage, and before we get into the strategies, Ramsey, why don't you tell us, because you were there before I came in, right? Uh, and we're talking about transformation, right? So let's paint the picture of where Apollo was in 2018, 19, 20, that period leading on to the inflection point, right? And then we'll talk about some of the strategies they worked on that led to where they are today.
yeah, wow. Well, it's funny because I started talking to Apollo in late 2018 or mid 2018 about joining them. I had actually brought them into the second company to replace Outreach, to replace ZoomInfo. And so in the midst of that talk is when Apollo got breached, late 2018. So the company, I think, had about 55, 56, 57 employees. I was a very early adopter at that point when it was just like the three founders and James, and they had a couple developers. So they scaled up pretty quickly. And after the breach, the data breach, which was not a big deal. It's like nothing that you can't Google, right? It's like a lot of information's out there. But at that time, it was a big deal, and competitors leveraged it. So I was the first hire post data breach in May 2019 is when I joined. I remember the first day I went into the office in San Francisco, flew out there, and holy cow, like you just cringe just walking in. Like the team's shrunk down to 12 or 13 employees. You just feel the tension in the air. You know, like you just walk into a room and you're like, this feels a little awkward and uncomfortable. And they tried their best. That they gave me an amazing welcome. That like donuts and pastries to my desk, the books, the all the stickers and the T-shirts. But you could tell the culture was hit pretty hard, but they all saw that the friends leave. So that's what I initially started with. And I knew, I think, firsthand that the culture is going to be the first thing that you got to work on. There's no way of turning this around if you're not going to have a decent culture. And so that's kind of where my journey started. And at that point, we were selling an average ticket of $10,000. You'd probably have like one or two meetings a day on the calendar if you're lucky. James was like CS, but he was also selling. Adam was there for a little bit. He was like ops, but also selling. And so I just had to step in and figure out how to redo this machine all over again. And yeah, it was a struggle. I'll let you take it on from there, but happy to continue on. Just let me know.
Sure, sure. Let me bring up my slides. All right, so here we go. The year is 2020, and I will get to how fierce the competition was. But what I do want to talk about, and we'll spend bulk of the time talking about the strategies that we used to kind of lead the transformation, right? So one thing I want to make clear that a lot of these strategies, we have the benefit of hindsight, so we can look back and kind of tell which strategies worked, right? But and Ramsey would agree to this. At that time, a lot of these initiatives were done out of desperation, out of which is, by the way, the case everywhere. Throwing a lot of spaghetti on the wall, and a few stuck, and most dead, right? But now that they are successful, it's easy to look back and see which ones worked, and there were many strategies that did not work as well. All right. With that caveat, here's a summary of our discussion. There's a lot of talking points. I'll rush through it, and Ramsey, feel free to jump in with any stories you want to contribute. So we'll look into the competitive landscape around 2020, why there was a big, gigantic trend. And if you find one in your space, do ride it, because most competitors don't. And then why doing something different in go-to-market is so important. And I'll talk about why when companies do PLG, they don't create the right sales team. And some of the decisions we took then has contributed hugely to Apollo's success. And then when companies talk about PLG, the part they miss out is why successful PLG companies are really sales-assist PLG or sales-driven PLG. I'll touch on that. Investing in awareness early on is so important. And then understanding churn is so important, because whenever you do PLG or go after SMB, the churn is horrendous. And that needs to be taken heads on early. And then creating a community just generates a whole new view of growth. We'll talk briefly about flywheels, and I added this slide for Ramsey because he wanted to discuss some foundational go-to-market best practices. And then to end, we'll talk about we'll zoom out and look into the overall market. So that's, Adam, how do you suggest, should you just go through these slides?
Just dive in. Yeah.
All right.
Strangely, I can't. I'm on this the computer of the music studio that I'm renting, and I can't see the slides. It was the same in my last webinar that I did too. So
really? Okay.
yeah, but I don't think it really matters. Let's just hop into it.
All right. So,
and I'll if I want to stop and ask you a question,
please do.
Yeah, I'll do it.
So we are looking at the competitive landscape. Apollo was selling data, also selling email engagement, and there were literally 10 plus vendors on each side. I would say the product itself was pretty weak, not differentiated from a lot of the other products out there, on both sides, right? So think about a crowded market with an undifferentiated product, and trying to win in this market. This might be deja vu for a lot of you out there. And yet they managed to win, right? So we'll talk about how, but make no mistake, the product was not superior, at least 4 or 5 years ago. Do you agree with that, Ramsey? You probably took a lot of sales call with this product.
Yeah. And the thing about Apollo, it was like the restaurant you walk into that has 1,000 things on the menu. Like, not everything is actually good, and you might find one thing, but it takes you a while to find it. And even this slide, what it just reminds me of, it's like, because you hop on so many sales calls and you're like, talking to somebody who's using outreach and Zoom Info, for example, and people are like, well, are you an outreach or are you Zoom Info? We're like, well, no, it's like Zoom Info and outreach combined. And so you end up becoming like kind of like they corner you in because you're competitor to outreach and you're competitor to Zoom Info, but outreach is not really competitor to Zoom Info at that time, and Zoom Info is not really competitor to outreach. So they're great at working. They together they're perfectly fine. They actually they team up against you if they wanted to, but they're not going to let you in to the club because you could take their customers on the other side of things. So in some ways it was awesome because you have everything in one place because that's what you were selling. But on the other side, the competitors are doubling up on you because of that. So yeah, that part was pretty rough, especially when you have a restaurant that has everything on the menu.
Thanks, Ramsey. So 2020 was also the time of COVID, and there was a trend that I would say Apollo was the only company in that list that took advantage of this trend. So let me elaborate. So when COVID hit or post-COVID, SMBs had lost some of their existing channels to collect leads, and they were going online saying, how are other companies getting leads? And then they were running into Zoom Info, which wouldn't talk to them unless they were willing to spend $30,000. So demand for not just data, but also other go-to-market tools for SMB has suddenly opened up, and that market was growing rapidly. And most of the vendor that you saw in that list were trying to just copy what Zoom Info had done. So they saw biggest opportunity reaching out to enterprise, whereas the market was opening up on the SMB end. And this is where another lesson is the product that Apollo had was very similar and possibly inferior to market leaders, but their go-to-market was very, very different. So there were companies like Rocket Reach and Lucia and others that were doing PLG, but they were doing PLG as a secondary market. They saw their success in replicating Zoom Info and going after enterprise because that was the path that was paved for everybody else, right? That's how big companies were built. Apollo, and I would say part of it was also out of desperation, went after PLG, but then they saw a little bit success, they doubled down, right? And I'll talk about what else they did around PLG, but the market rewarded them handsomely. And then the go-to-market ended up being very different and very distinct and very differentiated. And that differentiated go-to-market ended up helping their product, and their product became differentiated a few years down the line.
Okay, can I ask you something now?
Yes.
So if I'm sitting here thinking, I have 7 million of ARR, it's all sales led. I have these channels that are working okay. Nobody in my space is like freemium or PLG. If I do that, won't that just take my demo form fills to 0 and possibly jeopardize everything I've worked the last 5 years on? What would you say?
So
what would you say to that?
yes, no, and that's exactly the question that the company had to ponder right around that time. So I would look at it, is the market big enough where there are not just 7 million of your revenue, Adam, but also say there are other companies doing 4 billion in revenue, right? If the market is very big, then if you do PLG, yes, you lose your 7, but then some of your competitors could lose 70 million, right? So you could go after a much bigger market. And because you're doing this as you get the first mover advantage, the whole idea of doing business is to make your service well known and attract as many buyers as you can. Whether it's, if you can attract at a large price point, great. But if you can attract for freemium or small price point, that's good too, because you can charge them more later on, right? So, so I think that's the way Apollo looked at PLG. Yes, it would cannibalize some of the sales-led revenue, and it did. But then the overall market was so big that the growth kind of eclipsed the cannibalize. But also Apollo could do this because they didn't have a big business, right, on sales-led. But some of the other companies that where the cannibalization was far higher, they were already doing 30, 40 million. They just simply couldn't get into PLG. But that's also an opportunity, right? Because nobody else will do it. How else do you respond to the market needs and the trend that was evolving?
One more follow-up question.
Yes.
How long, if you were doing this today, how long of a sort of like, how long of a timeline, how long of a plank would you give yourself to walk, so to speak? Like, at what point do you say this is not working? We got to go back to doing before.
Honestly, I think within 6 months, you start getting signals. Within 12 months, you know for sure that this is working or not working. In the case of Apollo, I think within 12 months, they went from like having ambiguity questions to having no more question, knowing that this is not only working, this is the path that will take them to like 20 million, 50 million in revenue.
And Adam, to your point about sales motion and how that changes, I still remember the day that we had a leadership meeting, and you could tell like Santosh and Tim had a conversation prior to this, and they came up with the idea of like, hey, the sales team's used to selling $8, $10, $12,000 deals, and these guys come in and go, oh, we're gonna give the data away for free. Like, wait, what?
Right.
How are we supposed to compete with free when we're trying to sell it to $10,000 here?
Totally.
But to that point, I mean, Byron and Lindsay were only sales reps at that point, and man, they were troopers. Like we had to think about sales comp and how that changes. We had to be pretty generous and be able to get really creative. But that was a shocker. Like that's no, but there was a lot of pushback. But at that point, to Santosh's point, is like desperation. The company at this point, like, what have they got to lose? So it's kind of interesting what you will do if your back is against the wall at that point.
Great.
Incredible.
Great comment, Ramsey. Yeah, it's difficult for the company to do both, following up on Ramsey's comment, right? Both sales-led and PLG at the same time. It's good to eventually have different teams and very clear boundaries. It creates a lot of chaos when you're doing both. All right. So companies that do PLG, and I've been in those companies, and it's really important to hire a sales team that have low comp, low quotas, and possibly overseas, right? And the reason is, so PLG attracts SMBs, individuals, low price points, right? Like $2,000 deals. And if you don't have a rep that's excited about closing 2K and 5K because their quota is like 30K a month, then your customers never get the right side of the right attention, right? Because if you have a US rep at $1 million or $500,000 quota, they will chase 50K deals rather than like 5K, right? So in Apollo's case, we ended up hiring in Colombia for the large part, but overall in Latin America, I must have interviewed like 250 candidates during my time there. But I don't know what the numbers are today, but even when I was there, we ended up hiring like close to 100 AEs from LATAM. Without the right team structure, Apollo just couldn't have succeeded in PLG. So this is a really important attention. The math simply does not work out. By the way, the math with like this kind of hire, the ROI on rep is like 8x, 10x, versus if you hire in the US, it's like 3 to 5x if you're lucky.
You had told me that before, but if you would have asked me what made Apollo work based on my memory, I wouldn't have come up with that one. Like I knew it. And we're even doing it at RB2B, like Ilya's in Serbia, he's on the call. But like that's really interesting. You said and I get it, but like sales assisted PLG, it's almost a requirement if the sales team's going to scale to not be in America. It's really interesting.
Yeah, just depending on, in fact, that's the next slide, Adam. No PLG success is just PLG, especially in B2B. It's always a sales assist PLG. So you do need a sales team and a rather large sales team to succeed in PLG. And they're doing a lot of targeted outbound, and there's a whole lot of workflows to be followed to make PLG succeed. Anything to add here, Ramsey? I guess you were more focused on the enterprise deals. But
Just the end. Yeah, towards the end of my time, we were trying to crack the code on the enterprise motion
right.
before I left. But Adam, to the same point, is like we went from 2 meetings a day to 3 if you're lucky to we were no time to even breathe. It was like 20 meetings back to back. Everybody was taking calls, and thanks to Christian Patel, who's phenomenal with growth. Who just recently had left Apollo, but he's truly a genius when it comes to generating meetings and just growth altogether. But
Yeah.
it's huge. And if you look at Apollo now, I don't think, besides like there's a few enterprise sales reps, 2 of them are pretty new. Lindsay has been there for a while. Besides that, you'll only see account managers. They got even
Right.
rid of the title because it became to like, how do we, the sales assist is a great term there, but how do we, and your whole inbound led outbound, right?
Right.
How do we turn people into champions? How do we, hey, somebody's a free user. Can we look at the data points and figure out, okay, this person's a great title of a great company that can expand. Let's turn this person into a champion. How can we make this viral within one person that goes to the company? So, yeah, I feel like they redefined what a PLG motion even means in some extent.
Yeah, more inbound reps or PLG sales rep, if you can call those
I like that term. Yeah.
So in the beginning, Apollo wasn't really investing too much on what I would call awareness or marketing, but they did without kind of knowing. They did invest a lot on this programmatic SEO, which paid very rich dividends in terms of getting those meetings that Ramsey mentioned. They also focused on this rebranding because of this info leak that happened, which was a success. But some of these, even though there were very few cycles invested in awareness, but these paid rich, both of these paid very rich dividends.
What do you think today's equivalent of that is? Like, do you view that as an arbitrage or just like they got lucky because they kind of followed the Santosh playbook and it happened to still work? You know what I mean? Does that question make sense? Did I ask it the right way? I'm talking about the SEO strategy.
So SEO strategy, I think this was something that ZoomInfo had done very successfully when I was there. And it seemed like no reason not to do it as a data company. Yeah, this was probably the single most valuable marketing or awareness that was done for a while. Yeah, it just worked very well, at least in the initial days. Ramsey, do you have any comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, when you think about it, Apollo has the data, right? So if I'm going to search for Adam Robinson email, right? Why don't you just go ahead and make that SEO friendly, and it just shows Adam Robinson, and the email is a asterisk RB2B, for example, right? And now you want the data, subscribe. So that was a decent project that took some time, but once it released, that's when really the floodgates started happening. Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I would say if you're a data company and you don't do this, it's not excusable. This is like a bare minimum that you got to do to get into awareness.
Yeah. Cool. Let's keep rolling.
All right. So this churn is horrendous for all PLG companies because you are attracting individuals, SMBs that are not loyal. This is where I think Apollo lucked out through a lot of interaction with the customers and understanding the user base into building a platform So over time, they went from a single endpoint solution to like, say, two because of email and data, but later a dialer and insights, and there were like 5 or 6 apps, and now there's even more. And ZoomInfo did this through acquisition, and Apollo, because they were building this for SMBs, and SMB only wanted like 20% of the feature set of enterprise, right? So they were able to build a whole lot of apps, like low-calorie version of the enterprise apps out there. And that really helped with SMB churn. And there was a few other heuristics that helped. But this is a strategy that any of you can do with your business.
Love
and this happened kind of later. This kind of was a new S-curve that once some of the growth kind of materialized, turning power users and agencies. So whenever you do a freemium strategy, you end up with very large individual user base. It would be a mistake to just look at your user base for grabbing revenue, right? You got to grab attention, because every single, think of it as, you know, whether it's an enterprise user or a free user, they both have one vote on LinkedIn, right? You might as well. So Apollo ended up with millions of free users, right? So once they started to galvanize that into attention, the awareness just exploded on LinkedIn. So last 2 or 3 years that you see, maybe even the awareness, it was a lot to do with this UGC and community and small agencies that were incentivized to do this and so on. Very conscious effort. And then there were, as the business was being built, there was a lot of effort put into marketing, product, and data flywheels. So flywheel is just a way to subsidize your future marketing expansion or future sales or even data. If you're a data company, then data contribution is very valuable. So every time a new customer comes and they contribute some data, it becomes easier to recruit future customers. Something to consider in every self-serve PLG type business. So your free users are contributing not just revenue, but a whole bunch more. And Ramsey, I'll bring you in for this slide. You wanted to discuss.
Yeah, I think, it's when we were, you're talking about this, one of the first things that came to mind, the Apollo success, and I talk about this often, is a lot of companies A/B test until they find something that works, and they leave this behind and they continue on. Not the worst tactic, by all means, but again, it's to Santosh's point, might be out of desperation. What Apollo did is constantly A/B test, even when they found something that worked, they continue to find what doesn't work. And I think even this long shot of let's offer data for free, that was a gamble, right? That could have failed miserably, but when your back is against the wall and you kind of are limited to options, like let's go for Hail Mary and see what sticks. And they continue to do that. To even Santosh's previous slide about just being able to push every metric forward. It was down to a point of like, hey, let's download the extension, but let's move the button to this side. Let's push the button here. Let's A/B test. Let's A/B test pricing. If you have been using Apollo over the years, you probably have noticed how many times the search button has moved sideways, to the top, to the bottom, hidden. That was something that constantly was tested, to the point where like Christian did amazing at this, where he would like measure like, hey, by having the search button here, this increases adoption by 0.2%, right? By moving it here, that increases another adoption by another 0.1%. And they constantly tested this out. Conversations with customers. We talked about turning people into champions. Everybody hopped on customer calls. Every single person at the company hopped on customer calls, from our developers to Tim, to Santosh, to myself. There's a constant feedback loop. We had constantly documented it, document, track to see what feedback is going to bring you the highest amount of return, or what makes it sticky. I can't emphasize that enough. Like that is Apollo at its core. So just a little bit there, but yes, absolutely.
This is great. So no strategy, even though we are talking about transformational strategy, looking back with hindsight, none of them are complete without a really strong go-to-market foundational kind of best practices, right? And this is what Ramsey just described, where the team was like really focused on growth and with a great partnership between growth and sales that led to executing on a lot of these strategies. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. But here's a quick history lesson. What we just saw or spoke about Apollo doing. So prior to Apollo, ZoomInfo was the market leader, still is in some ways, right? But Apollo managed to rise above the noise of a lot of other competitors by following some of the strategies that we listed. Now, what's funny is when I was putting this together, I realized that when I was at ZoomInfo, a lot of the same strategies helped ZoomInfo cut through the noise against DNB. And at that time, the competitors were companies like Net Prospects and Avention and Data USA and a few others, right? Very different. It was 10 years before, prior to Apollo. So what that means is, very similar strategies can be applied. And I think it will. A new co might emerge that could start giving, I guess, competition to Apollo using, I made a post on this, but happy to take questions if anybody wants to me to elaborate. Adam.
Yeah, I have
Back to
a couple things to add. So my interpretation of where Apollo is at right now and why they're vulnerable is kind of the same reason that ZoomInfo became vulnerable. They raised in a horrible market a big deal at a $1.6 billion valuation. Very punchy. I don't know what their revenue is, but it was like in the teens multiple of their revenue. There's only one thing you can do at that point. You have to go after the bottom of ZoomInfo's market even harder and do bigger deals. It's the law of large numbers in SaaS. It's like
you increase prices and you go to enterprise.
yeah, it's like the upside. It's like the only thing they can do is kind of linearly increase their revenues. Once you've done a deal like that, like global domination is kind of not what you're playing for anymore, right? Like because there's a shortened time horizon and all this stuff. So that opens the opportunity for somebody to do the same thing
At
to
the
them.
bottom.
To them, it's like, well, I'm going to just give the whole thing away for free, but even more, and then like whatever. So TBD. Another thing that you've told me, Santosh, that I just loved when I heard it was like this idea that, I think one of the things people worry about with free is like, well, aren't people going to abuse this? And like, we deal with it with our B2B. It's like, well, let's look and see if like people are just creating the free account for 30 days, stopping and then recreating. It's like, yeah, people have created like 35 accounts, or something like that. Like as long as we've been around, people have been just like redoing the trial.
Read the system,
Yeah. So it's like, you had told me that there were in the lead gen community who were like some of your biggest advocates. These guys were making a $99 piece of software that would just scrape the free version for free. And rather than making that impossible, you just let them do it because it was like free. It was like free. It was the attention war, right? It was like, okay, fine. We could maybe like stop that, but like they love us. They love doing this. And it's just, kind of like imitation is flattery or something like that. It's like, it was just getting the Apollo's brand out so deeply ingrained. And I know some of those guys now, and it's still happening.
No, that's yeah. So, and you can do this with in data business because data has a marginal cost, like zero marginal cost, right? If you make a copy of the data, it doesn't cost you anything extra to make that copy, right? So if somebody steals it, so-called, it's really just getting the word out because they are going to share it with others, and more people know that Apollo exists. And I don't look at that negatively. I think that's just marketing should take on the cost, of course, within limits. But if you're giving it away for free anyway, so what difference is it if people try to scrape it?
Totally. So we got one question from Sachin earlier. He said, would you recommend doing PLG if the product is complex? Because one thing that I say is that
Right.
a beautiful PLG product is something like RB2B, where
Yeah.
it's so easy to understand, so simple to implement, and so straightforward that it just works because there's
Right.
no room for friction due to not understanding what's going on, right? Like,
Right.
what
Right.
is your view? It sounds like Apollo was somewhat complex when you started this, right?
Yes, it was a so my answer would be to maybe make a simple version of or like one slice of your product that is simple that people can the time to value is like literally like minutes where they can register and start getting value without having to be onboarded or talk to your CS rep or see if there is a way to, yeah, complex products don't make for great PLG because the whole idea with PLG is somebody installs in the middle of the night and still gets value and they have an itch and they can solve it through like in a few minutes with your product, right? But by that time they've learned, they've gotten good at it, now they can buy. So yeah, complex product that require learning is not a good fit. Find a way to simplify or take a small feature set and then make it PLG.
Yeah. So next question, how I could actually answer this one, but I want to hear your answer. So, what do you do with customer support for freemium users? How does free scale in that regard, right? Like, and that, by the way, before you started IBB, I'd never done a free product either. And that was, I was terrified of this. I'm not anymore because we have Rob, but like, I was like, I don't understand when you launched a product yesterday and it's free for 95% of people, literally by math, how you could possibly support the product and have good customer success or customer support without people paying you. How does that even?
Right. Well, we are doing this very successfully in our B2B. And um, so first, provide the support to your free user as if they are paid users, right? So don't pinch on support. But now there are many ways to do the support without making it too expensive. You don't need a team of 50 people. With all the automation that's available right now, you could do it with one person. And Adam, you can elaborate how we are doing with our B2B.
Yeah. So Rob, we have this guy. Rob is he's a special guy. And I was, I don't know if we would have found him on like through a typical job search, but we had hired him because retention.com liked him so much during the interview. They're like, we think you're overqualified to be a CS rep, but because he had engineering experience and, you know, all this other, but they're like, we're going to hire you and we think a role will pop up at some point. So I was talking to our head of ops last year and she's like, I think this guy, Rob, would be good for this. He just sort of created this self-service thing for some AI. So anyway, Rob is fantastic. And probably his best skill is, you know, he approaches this as an engineer would approach it. So we use all Intercom, and Intercom has basically two of these absolute killer apps. One is just simply workflows. So if you go to RBDB and you launch a support ticket, you're clicking buttons that answer almost any question that you would have. And in like 94% of situations, you get your answer, which is crazy. And then another 3.5% are actually AI generated answers, which are accurate a shockingly high percentage of the time. And then the other 3% go to human. So that's just incredible, right? Like, uh, you know, and it's counting all of, you know, our search doc material also, but most of it's going through this chatbot. And we get like, you know, 2,000 interactions per week because people have to lay a pixel down or whatever. And they're only talking to 3.2% of people at this point. So I would say, you know, the tools are there to do that, but you need an individual who thinks in that way. Like you should see these, you know, he Miro boarded out everything and like, I mean, it's all like that's the type of work that is required. So it's almost like, if your goal is to support a huge amount of free users and you want to do it in the way that we're doing it, that first support hire has to have that way of thinking, like an engineer's approach to
To,
this problem.
to give you a kind of another layer of, I guess, context, at our B2B, we are supporting over 10,000 paid and free accounts with just 1 or 2 people in support. Apollo, we followed a different route because AI wasn't that strong at that point. So we ended up hiring a very large support team, probably 50 to 100 people in support to support probably hundreds of thousands of users. But now I think you need just 1 or 2. You just have to have someone like Rob with technical AI first approach.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of talk with like kind of cold email that it's the same thing. You used to have people doing outreach, but like with the AI tools and the sort of stuff that you can build, if you're somebody who's one of these techie builder growth type people between email and ads, it's like the scope of what would have been a lot of people can be mostly done in a pretty good way for a lot of use cases by one person who understands how to use all these tools. We'll see. Our dream is to keep this company like tiny. Well, we'll see how long we can do it, but we're gonna try. So Jason has a question. Not sure if you can answer, but oh wait, I'm sorry, wrong one. Arun, do you have a measure of at what point Apollo started making money cash positive during the PLG revolution?
Oh, so that is easy because the nature of Apollo, and I love that in companies in general, is they were profitable very, very early on. So we were like scrappy and hiring overseas for a lot of the new hires. So PLG doesn't mean you have to lose money.
Right.
In fact, that's how we are doing with our B2B as well. We are doing our hiring. We are like going to be very profitable.
Hope so. So I'm going to take this one from Akshay. Would PLG work when your customer segment is primarily enterprise? Because smaller customers don't really have the maturity to consume the data. Wait, I'm not sure I understand the back half of that question. Do you guys, let's go to another one.
Okay.
What if you had 2 versions of the same product from the start, like PayPal, freemium and enterprise? How would PLG and go-to-market motions work for it?
Yeah, so you can do PLG with the enterprise as well, but I would suggest staying away from it. Do PLG for SMB or mid-market, even if it requires 2 different products. And then you will see a spillover effect, right? So as you open up for SMB mid-market, 80%, 90% of the folks that sign up will be SMB lower mid-market. But then those 10% would be wildcards, where you'll see somebody from like Microsoft or Google or others sign up as well and start using it. But don't focus or depend on the enterprise. Just over time, it'll help you get into enterprise leads. But the SMB mid-market is where you make most of your revenue, or at least early on, all your growth comes from that.
I got to share on our end so far, and it's fairly young data that we have on the web reply side. We've seen it, a decent amount of enterprise companies have conversations with us, but they start out on the very light plan to try it out, and they realize they need more features, and that's where they come in. But we're not even proactively reaching out to them at all whatsoever. So to your point, I think like to not focus on enterprise has really been kind of we're not even thinking about it at all. It's not even anywhere on our roadmap for right now. But they are falling in because they come in on the free plan to test it out. So
hey, Ramsey, do you want to just quickly mention what you do to give a context?
yeah. So geez, Adam, I'm almost I know your second startup, I think was it 40 weeks to a million, right?
The second one was like 27 weeks.
27 weeks. Okay. I think we did the first million in 39 weeks. So I was like, I was gonna
That's
almost there.
that's still you're on.
But we have RevGen Labs and RevReply kind of launched them at the same time. RevGen Labs, a lead gen agency. Always like to say we do things differently, but I'm sure everybody else says the same thing. But what was born out of that is RevReply. It's the first hard-coded autoresponder, not low code, built on the make or NAN. This thing's able to handle objections, follow up, be able to connect to your calendar, share availability, send you send you replies through Slack, so you can edit and send right through Slack. So it's definitely needed. But even speaking to you right now, both of you, uh, the complexities of it is definitely the biggest hurdle, right? It's if the product is too complex to implement, it definitely the pain point that we're feeling. And so we're actually starting to remove some of the features. And we're like, let's just make it very simplified. So that's what we're doing in the process right now. Because onboarding it makes it a lot harder. People can't just go self-serve themselves. So we are hopping on calls with, even for users. But that's a lesson I grabbed from Apollo, but we're taking that feedback and we're applying it and over and over and over, rinse and repeat. So yeah.
Can I
I've,
that? So
what was
can I add something to that? Can you hear me? Did I?
Please,
Yes.
yeah.
No, you're good.
So I think one of the greatest superpowers that company builders can have, especially in the beginning, is the ability to keep their product and their value proposition like searingly simple. Because when you're building it, before you have a brand, if you can get yourself or your face or your company name or whatever it is associated with this one very narrow idea and build your identity around that, it just helps in 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 so much more. That I believe that the marketing part of it and is so much more important than sort of feature parity early days. It's like if you can just be a lot better at this one thing and get everyone to know you as that and then start playing the feature game later on. I think especially now, it's just a superpower. And I think a lot of people have a very hard time not adding complexity to products.
Such a hard time. If I can say the same thing you said, Adam, in slightly different words, entrepreneurship is really a game of like, for lack of better metaphor, like transmission, right? So how far can you get the message out? So a simple product and a simple narrative travels the farthest. Everything else just causes friction, and then enough people don't get to, even though there are 8 billion humans out there, and you could get to every single or a bulk of them if you're so simple and so obvious to understand, right? And your product reflects your messaging.
Yep.
All right, what else do we have? 10 more minutes.
So yeah, we got a few more minutes. This is kind of like somebody's wondering if you have a take on the current state of Apollo, either one of you. Sort of nonstop hiring, super like push on content community. Do you have an opinion on that, or is it just
I
like
will
what they're going to do and it's
I
just
will not give a detailed opinion. It would be unfair, and I'm not part of the company right now, so I may not even know enough. But as a outside observer, I think companies, when I was working, it was a very different company, right? So, but companies go through these phases, especially if they raise hundreds of millions of dollars. Their vision, goal, everything changes, and they've reached a certain revenue range. So growing from here to like something much bigger will require a whole different set of strategies, which may not reflect the ones that from a few years ago. But yes, it's kind of I think a bulk of their investments have to go into market growth and push towards enterprise. The product, I think, doesn't require too much innovation, but acquisition and brand awareness, there's a lot more, and I suspect that's what they're doing. But it's a really tough job, given ZoomInfo is pretty solid and have cornered the enterprise market, right? So it's going to require a lot of new strategies. What got them here will not get them there. So that's all I can say.
So,
Ramsey, do you have anything?
Yeah, I would actually just say, look, when similar to you two, right? Adam, you're like, okay, well, bringing Santosh on, coincidence. Everything he's touched turns into gold. And look, RBTB, look at retention.com. You guys have been able to grow it. Bringing in the right talent makes it that much more of an impact. And Apollo actually just brought on Matt Curl, who's their COO now. And Santosh and I got a chance to work with him. I brought him
Matt
as
is
a mentor.
great. Yeah.
Matt is phenomenal. Like, I can't even speak highly of him enough. I worked with him at 5 stars, and he's a great mentor of mine. Brought him into Apollo as a mentor, and he's been, advising the company for quite some years since my time there. As a result of that, and he, I think having him on board kind of changes my perspective on Apollo and the trajectory. Like, they're in great hands, and he's like the Santosh, the Swiss Army knife. So that gives me a lot of hope for them.
Nice.
great. We have time for a couple more questions. We got a question over here about, we have a few PLG questions here. So let's see if we can how about this one? We've been servicing enterprise for a decade, and we're now looking to grow in SMB and B2C. We're trying to avoid creating 3 different products for 3 different experiences for users. How do you do PLG to different segments without confusing people due to different targeting languages or different targeting language?
Right. So I don't know the product, but if you can, first of all, your hunch is right. You don't want to create 3 different code base, 3 different products. Take the same product and see if you can split it into 3 different packaging, either by feature or by, like in the data space, it's easy, right? Because you can limit it by data credits. But if you can, there's enough value for the free users or SMBs for a low SEP and low calorie, but it does solve certain use case. I think that's kind of the way to go. And you totally should do freemium. I don't care what sector you are in. Your sales team will hate it, but if you do it the right way, it'll actually end up helping them rather than be competitive to them.
Inbound, baby.
Inbound it
It's
is.
the only way. It's the only way these days, especially. So when it comes to targeting to acquire users via PLG, and you're trying to unbundle from an existing marketplace, example, users from monday.com for a specific alternative, are there best practices that come to mind? So I think what's being asked is, if I'm trying to pull, a certain segment of users off of Monday or off of Slack or off of something else, PLG, how would you coach me?
So I'm still not sure of the question. Is it around segmentation, around?
I think it's around segmentation. It's an anonymous question, so.
Yeah. So PLG works best. Again, think about the kind of people that in your vertical that are going to sign up, right? So like self-serve themselves, right? So for enterprise sales, you target like decision makers, let's say VPs, but then there are users. They're not part of the buying process, or other than maybe being an influencer. But PLG, the users are going to sign up, right? And they are the influencer. So you go bottoms up in PLG. Whereas in enterprise sales, you go top down. And most companies that are doing enterprise sales look at this comparative, like we alluded to earlier. But the right sales motion is this where bottoms up and top down can kind of handshake somewhere in between, right? And assist each other. And this is where you can do a sales assist PLG, where you can coexist with enterprise sales and hopefully help them. Because if imagine going to a VP sales for an enterprise conversations and telling them, hey, you've got 200 team members, out of which 40 of them are already using our tool, right? That becomes an easy kind of conversation. And you can impress those 40 to use because of free or freemium offering in your vertical, kind of the bottoms up approach. You can even target them using your outreach, right? And then stage it such that it assists your enterprise conversation.
Incredible. 4 minutes left. Let's do one more question, and then I will let you know, actually, next week. A bunch of people always ask me, I don't know if you could ask this too, Santosh. It's like, I don't know. I don't have a LinkedIn audience. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, what should I do to start building a presence on LinkedIn? Like, how do I get started? Right? Because surely, but it's a strange thing to answer for me because I think I had a unique experience with it for a lot of reasons. So, I wanted to bring somebody on who had a lot of experience in working with brand new people with LinkedIn founder brand building. So I met this girl, Jessica, who started an agency called Simply Be that was acquired by Hawk Media. It's like the best selling Hawk Media is this like e-com marketing agency. They're big. It's like flying off the shelves, these personal branding packages. So I wanted to ask her because that's literally what they do. And they have an array of different offerings that over the years they developed to basically start people out in different ways with different programs, depending on what their goals were. So it's not gonna be, she doesn't know in the agency anymore. It's not gonna be her trying to sell you stuff. It's gonna be her talking about like basically the different choices that one has when they approach this problem of how do I start building my personal brand? What are my options? What do people do? If I want help, who do I ask? And what are the time commitments or whatever? So that's what next week's going to be all about. Please come. It'll be awesome. The week after, I'm actually really excited about. I'm having, I've gotten really obsessed with UGC because I think organic social is like a superpower in today's world. And either if you knows how to post great content on social that the algorithm loves and you can put your own dollars behind it, that's like superpower number one. Like it's the ultimate leveler versus big companies. Like, our reach, our B2B has been around for 16 weeks, but our reach is incredible. It's like what Apollo's is because we know how to make great organic content and we can put ad dollars behind it, right? So either the ability to do that or the ability to harness it like Clay did. Like Clay can't do what Santosh and I do, but they still have harnessed this amazing group that they then can put ad spend behind. We're going to talk to Bruno, who put together Clay Creators, about how and why he did that and like what he did at Webflow that was similar. And I'm having Ryan Babenzian, who's the founder of Jolie, who's the best D2C example. He got 30,000 pieces of UGC created about his shower head last year. They got 0 to 50 million run rate with 3 full-time employees, all because of that UGC strategy. So anyway, 2 weeks from now, UGC. Yeah, we got some good shows coming up. Anyway, that's the end of it. Ramsey, thank you so much for joining us. Santosh, thanks for all the guys. Thank you, everybody who were guests. I will be sure to send the recording out tomorrow in my newsletter. This was awesome. Really had a great time.
Thank you.
We'll see you all next week.
Great. Thanks all.
Yeah.
Take care.